All right, guys, welcome in. Welcome in. Happy Valentine's Day, first and foremost. I hope everyone's enjoyed their day, didn't eat too much candy and that sort of thing. And I hope that you got exactly what you were hoping for. I hope the day went as expected or better than expected. So, welcome in. As you guys are coming in, be sure and share this out. We are talking about our 30 books in 30 weeks personal development series. And this week we have been talking about loving what is. And it is absolutely one of my favorite books of all time. And I wanted to make sure that I shared with everyone that why this is my favorite book of all time. This book was one that when I went through one of the hardest times of my life, this book taught me how to really, really, truly address, cope, respect, and appreciate reality for exactly what it is and to not fight with it. What's going on, Melissa? Hey, Gregory. Thanks for joining in, guys. So as you guys come in, I'm excited to share with you tonight. We're going to talk about whose business are you minding? My business, your business, or God's business? And that was that was a huge lesson for me from my former codependent lifestyle that I lived several years ago. So for those of you who may be joining in for the very first time, you don't really know who I am, don't know what this is all about. Let me introduce you to myself and let me fill you in on this stupendous process. So we're doing 30 books in 30 weeks, which is a personal development project that I started a couple months ago, back in November actually. And then in 2018, I decided to ramp it up for this year and really take a deeper dive into these books and truly be able to share more of the concepts with you. Because what I was doing before was taking a book a day and doing like 30 books in 30 days. And it just wasn't enough time, especially on something like this. Melissa, the author is Byron Katie. I don't know if you can see that, but it's Byron Katie is the author. The way that she tells the stories in here and walks you through this process is absolutely incredible. And when you study these methods and you actually apply them to your life, they will change your life. They will change your life. They will change your relationships. I promise you this. And so anyway, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Marcy Batiste. I'm a public speaker. I'm an author. 3 of my favorite things is living life on Mars, being sold out to my happiness, and helping women shine. And truly walking with them as they discover what I call their star power, and then teaching them how to embrace it, and then to be able to share that light with other people. And so that's one of the most favorite things in my whole entire world about all of the work that I do, whether I'm working with domestic violence, if I'm working on self-esteem, whether we're working on business planning, whatever the case may be, being able to walk with another woman while she discovers her star power and realizes the impact that she can have on the world. And so besides that, I have a training company called Bankable Success Advisors, where I do domestic and workplace violence training as well as business contingency training for small businesses. And on the personal side, it's all about curing emotional bankruptcy, which is why this book is so important. And I've been very, very intentional about the books that I've chosen as I'm rating my personal development library. So very, very strategic about the books that I'm choosing for this, because ultimately, no matter if you're a part of my Raising the Bar tribe or not, I want people to be able to deal with and cure that emotional bankruptcy that we're all walking around with. If you're not intentional about addressing the vacancies and the voids that you feel, it's really a struggle to be in relation with other people in a whole and healed way. So tonight we're going to talk about whose business are you minding? My business, your business, or God's business. And not everybody knows the difference. And I've shared with you guys in the past that I used to be very, very codependent. Milton Stuckey, what's going on? I used to be very, very codependent. And part of, a really big part of codependency is that you are constantly worrying about other people's problems. So you're always essentially minding other people's business and not your own business. And then from this standpoint, when we're talking about minding God's business, that's the reality. That's everything that's outside of my control. It's outside of your control. That's God's business. That's why you can't control it. That's why I can't control it. It's not ours to control. It's not for us to control. And so a lot of times we get so caught up and so hung up trying to mind God's business and other people's business that we forget to mind our own. And so when you're not minding your own shop, guess what happens? Falls apart, shuts down, breaks up, closes, whatever. And so I want to walk you guys through the beginning part of this process tonight, and then we'll take a deeper dive on it tomorrow and actually go through the process of what she calls the inquiry. And the inquiry is just simply a series of 4 questions that you'll ask yourself in any given situation. But tonight we're going to talk about what she calls doing the work. And she calls it a neighbor's worksheet. And the neighbor's worksheet, you actually ask yourself some questions, and you're beginning to identify the things that cause you pain, the things that cause you stress, the people in your lives, and then you really begin to break down what it is about them that's causing these feelings. If it could be something as simple as one of the examples in the book, the lady says, my husband just makes me crazy. Everything he does bothers me, including how he breathes. There are people like that we have in our inner circles where we're just like, oh my God, like if they take one more breath. And it grinds on you to that point. But guess what? That's your problem. That's not their problem. It's your problem. They're not going to change. That's one of those things that's not your business. So you have to bring that back and circle that back around and deal with it in a way that it is your business, not their business. So what she has you do is go through this exercise where you really write down all these people and all these situations that cause you irritation, that cause you pain, that cause you frustration, whatever the case may be. And, she always says it's your list, it's your work. So you're allowed, when you make this list, to be as trifling as you want to be as petty as you want to be. That the things that bother you don't have to make sense. They bother you. It's your pain, it's your frustration, it's your work. And so allowing that to be whatever it's going to be, but be honest about it. Nobody even ever has to see the list except you. And then this is going to become sort of your working manifest that you're going to operate from as you begin to walk through all of these different emotions and all of these different feelings. And, it could be things about their looks. It could be things about money. It could be things about their size. It could be things about the way they fold their socks or don't fold their socks. It could be how people do laundry. Like, whatever it is, whatever is grating on your very, very last nerve, put it on the list. Because what we want to do is identify all of these stressors, all of these triggers, and then start working through, like, why is that a trigger for you? Why is that something that bothers you to the point of extreme frustration or even mild frustration in some cases? But you just like, oh my God, like, I can't, not one more second, I can't do them. Not one more minute, I can't do it. And so we want to begin to identify those things. And, one of the things that was interesting to me about this book was that this strategy, these concepts, this inquiry process works in every single aspect of your life, whether it's your personal life, it's your business life, related to your finances, related to intimate relationships, familial relationships, whatever. It literally works in every single instance, because what it does is it forces you to bring it back to you. And so one of the things, I say that I live life on Mars, and I'm like, it's my world, my life, and my rules. And I'm okay letting everything be about me in my world. Well, part of that in part comes from this concept, because how I feel is always about me. It's never about the other person. And so when you realize that how you show up in the world is about you, how you interact with people is about you, it's not about them, then you have to take on a certain level of ownership, but then it frees you up from a whole lot of the finger pointing and the blaming, so that you don't like get stuck on it. And so that was one of the things, like, it was compelling to me that you could use it in such a broad range of things, even from whether it's like the death of a loved one, whether it is, that you, one of my things was being around people that I no longer had care for, that I no longer had love for, being able to cut those ties, end those relationships. And then it was another thing to be able to use it to deal with childhood traumas, because that was a huge thing for me. Growing up, a lot of my codependency, a lot of my choices were result of things that happened in childhood. And I didn't even, in retrospect, like, I didn't even have a bad childhood per se. I actually had a pretty good one. But there were just a few things that happened along the way that, because I didn't have the tools in my toolbox to deal with them appropriately, they ended up creating more of an issue than they would have had to had I known how to deal with them better at the time. So, are you minding your business, my business, or God's business? And so how do you know the difference? Typically, if you are minding your business, your sentences always start with I and me. And most of the time, that's a good thing. But there are certain words like should or shouldn't, will or won't, can't, that, or when you hear yourself saying, he or she made me do something, they made me feel a certain way, they made me do a certain thing. That's your choice. It's always your choice. And so when you hear yourself using the words should and shouldn't and could and couldn't, that's in direct conflict with reality, because what the reality is they did. Whether they should or shouldn't was a subjective opinion based on your thought and your attachment to the thought. And we'll go into how you would kind of process that as we go through this for the rest of the week. But when you're saying somebody should or shouldn't do something, that's your opinion. The reality is they probably already did or didn't. Nothing you can do about that. So how you attach to that thought and how you attach emotion to whatever it is they did or didn't do, is what's creating the hardship and the pain for you. And so when we talk about the worksheet, right? So I'm going to read to you guys directly from the book so I don't misquote anything. This is what she says for doing your neighbor worksheet. And this is, remember, this is all of the things and the people and the issues and the circumstances and the experiences that caused you irritation, pain, frustration, aggravation, any negative response, whether it's emotion, fear, depression, all of that. So the first thing you're going to ask is, who angers, confuses, saddens, or disappoints you, and why? What is it about them that you don't like? And be specific. So that's the first question. The second is, how do you want them to change? What do you want them to do? What do you think they should be doing? So when we talk about that should and shouldn't, that's where that comes into play. Number 3 on your worksheet is, what is it that they should or shouldn't do, should or shouldn't be, should or shouldn't think or feel? What advice could you offer? So if you're saying that they should or shouldn't do something, then presumably you have a solution. You have a better recommendation. So what is that? Put that on the paper. Write it down. And do you need anything from them? What do they need to do in order for you to be happy? And when you think about that, I want you to keep in mind that happiness is an inside job, so be very careful here. But most of us aren't adept at owning our own responsibility for our happiness. Number 5, what do you think of them? And make a list. And this is like characteristics about them, like they're honest or they're dishonest, or they're rude to people, or whatever the case may be. But you just want to be honest about what you, basically this is your judgment of them. And then the last question is, what is it that you don't want? What is it that you don't want to experience with that person again? And that's one of the things when I'm talking to my clients all the time, when we're talking about situations that have gone awry or whatever, experiences that have caused us heartbreak or frustration or whatever, is I tell them, remember how this feels. Think about how this feels right now, in the moment, in your deepest despair, your deepest fears, deepest frustration. Think about in this moment, just how does this feel? And then tell yourself, I don't ever want to feel this way again. And then you move into a dynamic of preparation to prepare you to do things differently so that you don't find yourself back in that same position, repeating those same mistakes, making those same choices. And that was the biggest thing, and that's always the biggest thing anytime we go on a transformation journey or healing journey, is to make sure that we know exactly, we identify exactly how we feel so that we can plan to never feel that way again. You want to avoid that, but you need to be strategic about it. You can't just go haphazardly and just expect, oh, like I'm better now because I've pushed that aside, I forgot about it, I let it go, is what people say. You don't need to let it go, you need to work through it. It's not about letting it go, it's about working through it. And so that's what this is. And then tomorrow night we're going to talk about and get into the inquiry questions. So once you've worked on your worksheet and you've made your list of things and people and places and issues and experiences that frustrate you, what you want from them, what could they do better, and what solutions you have, then we walk through each one of those things and we ask these 4 questions. And this is the inquiry. Number 1, is it true? And that's powerful. Trust me, that's powerful. And we'll talk about it tomorrow. But is it true? Can you absolutely know that it's true? How do you react when you think that thought? And then who would you be without the thought? And then the final step is to turn it around, because it's always about you. It's never about the other person. It's always about you. Remember, we attract what we are, not what we want. And the things we most often don't like in other people are the things we most often don't like in ourselves. And so when we start digging through this kind of stuff, and you get real comfy, you get real cozy with reality of all of the stuff that you need to change about you, very seldom is about them. You attract what you are, not what you want. So mind your business, not their business, and God's business. God got this. God got all of this. What have you got? You got one, what they say, you got one job. You got one job. That's all you got. All right, so that's it for tonight, guys. We'll talk about this in more detail. We'll get into the heart of the inquiry, how that process works, what it looks like all grown up in real life situations, and I'll share with you how I learned to use this inquiry process to change many of the relationships in my life. So in the meantime and in between time, guys, as always, thanks for joining in. Thanks for sharing out, and thanks for living life on Mars. We'll talk soon.